All right, so welcome everyone to the Variety Hour, the final talk of the Animation Summit. This is great. I'm your host for the hour, Mike Jungbluth, and joining me over the course of the next hour will be 26 other speakers. I would recommend don't even bother to take notes, as there's going to be a lot happening, and notes could actually mean you're going to miss something. This is, of course, being recorded, so I guess let's just think of that as your notes. For people that have been to the Animation Summit before or watched past year's videos online, you might be asking yourself, wait, final talk of the summit, where are the tricks of the trade? Where are the animation micro talks? Those were the best. Well, they're gone. We aren't doing them this year, which likely has you now asking another question. What sort of dum-dum doesn't bring back what are often the highest rated talks of the summits? Well, our answer is this. What starts as inspired can become a novelty or formulaic. Over the years, we sort of found cyclical repeating presentations starting to happen. The craft focus of the tricks of the trade and the culture focus of micro talks were sort of merging into one, and the clarity of each was sort of missing. So this led all of us on the advisory board for the summit to ask, even if something is popular, when is the right time to give it a rest? Or try something new that might break it entirely. I don't know the answer to that, but talking with Mick, our gut said, let's try now. And depending on how the next 60 minutes go, 58 minutes, we can see if our guts were right. But what I already know for sure is that taking a risk and involving others, all of these wonderful people, it means sharing the success and assuming the blame. So when you get an email asking for feedback about this session, please give credit to the speakers of the portions that you enjoyed. And if one of the less traditional segments doesn't land, it was likely my fault, so lay the blame at my feet, not theirs. I applaud them for taking the risk with me. All right, so let's shake it off, get rid of the past, try something new by getting all of you in the audience involved at the start of a session instead of the end. Mick, if you can please rejoin me on stage. Okay, so animation is okay, so Mick is going to start a game of telephone at the end there. Just remember, please check with the person next to you if they're cool with you whispering and getting into their personal space, or if they'd prefer you to write it down for them on paper, on your phone, whatever. Everyone has different personal boundaries. Please be respectful of each other and do not make this weird. Serious. Okay, so as for what I think animation is, well, I wrote a book about it, which just officially released last week. Thank you. Shameless plug, I'll be doing a book signing at the expo floor on Thursday, 2 p.m. You should swing on over, buy a copy, let me scribble in it. We'll have a good time. I actually finished the first draft of the book just before GDC last year, which means the last 366 days has been a process of edits and waiting. And for that entire time, my head has been suspended in the last thing I wrote for it, the afterword. So now, again, I want to start at the end by traveling to the past. The Empty Space is a collection of essays from the 1960s written by theater director and producer Peter Brook. In it, he breaks down the state of how he viewed the then modern theater into different groups. And I like to think of them on a triangle. So, at the bottom left is the deadly, that which bores you to death, a reanimated corpse of stuffy, generic, tired establishment. Boo. At the top of the triangle is the holy, something so good, it feels like a religious awakening. It is a mastery of the craft at such a high level, beyond what people thought was possible, that it elevates it out of the deadly. And to the right, you have the rough. This is something so different, you question reality, what you're doing, what it's doing, what we're doing. The sincerely absurd, the amateur, the vulgar, putting a new or recontextualized spin on something to propel it away from the deadly. What Brooks wrote in the 60s still feels so very modern to us now, doesn't it? I suspect this has always been true and will always be true of every creative medium, all of which makes the deadly a black hole with an ever-growing event horizon as it consumes more content. It sure feels like everything in this industry is being pulled in and then trapped by what is considered the popular content. How many new games or hell GDC talks have you sat there and thought, I've experienced this before? The only way a collaborative creation can escape is to collectively pull in a singular direction away from the deadly. That is at the core of what makes for a solid vision and direction. Aligning people to pull in the same direction to land as far away as they can from the deadly. In many cases, the vision and direction, you'll need to pick a spot on the triangle as far as you can from the deadly as you can get, but still, it's going to be inside that triangle. In some instances, that vision and collective energy might actually be able to push the edges of the holy or the rough further than what was already established. And that's great in both cases, because each can expand the triangle then to allow for more visions in between. Okay, so now a bit of a tangent. It can be tempting to try and define the speed and distance metrics of the deadly black hole, thinking that if you measure it, you can surely keep some sort of controlled distance from it. But is it even possible to know if you have or haven't crossed the event horizon of the deadly until it's too late? And is the mere act of trying to gauge the metrics of the deadly not already pulling you towards it? So another random tangent. The publicly available tools that allow for AI-generated works largely empower the amateur rough to look more holy, which in turn exponentially expands the event horizon of the deadly with no guarantee of extending the points of the holy or the rough on the triangle. So, let's talk about why we create then at all. In Courage to Create, the psychologist Rollo May uses the term encounter to discuss the moment an artist engages with the creative process. I love that term of intentional creation between the artist and the work. Encounter. But I believe there's actually also a second encounter, when someone engages with what the artist created. Call this the encounter of the viewer, the audience, the player. And creative success and failure can happen at either encounter, independent of one another. How is that? Well, that answer comes from Tolstoy in 1897, where in What is Art, he discusses how society assigns value to art. And he specifically derides society's continued focus on beauty and aesthetics as the driving value of art. The primary value of appeal and pleasure could be seen and felt in how we communicate in language, text, visuals, and a singular focus like that is a recipe for creating something in the deadly. The different values a person brings to their encounter with a creation on either side is how each can arrive at different assignments of success or failure. What are the societal factors that are driving your values? And how can we, as all of the creatives here, influence all of the varied societal values to prepare for more interesting encounters to move us out of the deadly? I have thoughts. We need to be consciously training taste and intuition of both the dev teams and the audience. Encouraging new and different tastes will directly influence personal values. A lot of teams strive to hire or create a culture of similar tastes to create with a shared vision, but unless everyone is pulling that shared vision towards the holy, that sameness can actually make for a very quick slide back down into the deadly. Okay, so yet another tangent. Large legacy teams, studios, or IP are sometimes compared to the ship of Theseus. How many people or features can be changed or replaced until it's no longer the same ship? But that assumes the boards are even replaced at all. More often than not, it isn't actually a ship, but a Jenga tower. Another place to intentionally then influence values is with friction and flow. Everyone talks about wanting to get into a flow state when creating or playing. But back to Rollo May, the aha moments that we have when we're creative actually happen when we shift between the conscious and unconscious mind. Friction is a moment that we can use to break you out of an unconscious flow state. Game designers talk of friction in terms of the player experience. But what about the friction in our creative process? We're either focused by trying to remove it entirely, which is powered by a business value of efficiency, or we're frustrated by when it happens completely unexpectedly, things crash and you hate everything. But how can we communicate and control the friction of the creative process to allow for more aha moments? Friction, flow, taste, encounters, deadly, holy, rough, this all leads us to white elephant art versus termite art, an essay written by the artist and critic Manny Farber. In it, he breaks down art and film into two categories. The white elephant art that is made to be big, impressive, and surely something the influencers of the world will delight in sharing and owning. And then there's the termite art, that which is singular in its focus, uncaring of those that are watching, intent to get to whatever creative destination it seeks, leaving behind not some ornate creation, but the detritus of whatever it devours. So I wonder, how do you collectively foster the tastes and intuition of termites? If the collective mass of what the termite leaves behind can be stronger than the collective mass of the black hole, what if what we take is all of these termites...
Enough. Mike, what the hell are you talking about?
Termites?
Why?
Because I'm making a point.
What? No, you're not. This is the Animation Summit. You're just talking about rabbly shit. Stop. I'm so sorry, everybody. Get off stage. I'm very sorry about Mike. I don't know what happened there. Apparently you write one book, and all of a sudden, you're whatever that was. Okay. All right. Let me bring this back to something real, something useful. Hi, everybody. Hi. I'm Patty Walker. I'm a senior technical product manager for animation at Epic Games, specifically game animation. Gameplay animation. Which means I'm driving a lot of the animation workflow and tech advancements at Epic. So it makes sense for me to drop some Unreal knowledge. Oh! I know, okay. One sec. I have to... Just bear with me. 1 second. Before you ask, yes, these are official Matrix Neo glasses. And no, you can't have them. Let me rap to you guys. No, I'm not going to actually rap. Just to be clear. Use your technology, or tech, as I call it, in a way that matches your production schedule, or pro-sketch, also what I call it. For example, let's say you're making a sweet new Titanic game for the latest home video computer, right? We know what we're talking about. You fire up your AOL, you gotta get on there, surf the interwebs. Top Leo art page. You find it, you're like, I need Leo. I need more Leo. I want Leo in my life. But oh no, there's not enough there. There's not enough Leo. Maybe I can use this cool new tool I saw called, that's right, motion matching. Weird, right? No, but it's accurate. Which, by the way, Epic, yeah, are releasing as production ready in UE 5.4. Yeah. That's right. Thank you. The applause was necessary. Now, you might be bugging. You might be thinking, hundreds of Leo animations in a short time frame? No. How are we going to make that possible? Downloading each one of these things on my 56K modem is going to take weeks each Leo. Well, don't worry. You can use motion matching in different ways. That's right. Like a sparser set for a specific action. Rad. And sets are really just like conversation choices in your favorite game. That's this one here. Titanic, Adventure at a Time. That's right, the smash 1995 hit. Tools are just that. Tools. I know. And they work better in some situations and a total bummer in others. Using tools correctly will save you time, effort, and it allows you to frame problems you're tackling correctly, giving you more time to slam your opponents with pogs. That's right, pogs are back. And also for Gen Z, pogs were a circular thing that you hit with a other circular thing that was mostly metal, and even ruining your own pogs. I don't understand it either. So take a step back, figure out the right tools for the job you're doing on your game. Let the tools assist you, and using them properly is the key. Pogs again, baby. We're slamming to the next one. For more motion matching, come see our talk. It's really my talk, let's be honest. But there was 2 other people there, and they also take up most of the time. It's that Wednesday, 2 o'clock, at the YBCA Theater. Boom. And more Leo fan art. Check out my GeoCities page, everybody. I'll post the hyperlink somewhere else later. Peace!
Animation
is the illusion of life. Now, here's 3 things animators should know about UI. Oh no, did the video not work? 3 things animators should know about UI. Number 1, responsive animation. We all want our UI to be super slick and dynamic with cool build-on animations and exciting flourishes. But when the player pushes a button, things need to happen immediately. Never ease in. The UI should take off like a bullet. You can ease out for days, but the motion should be happening in a quarter of a second or less. This creates responsiveness in the animation. It makes things snappy, and it feels good to use. Number 2, responsive inputs. One of the most fundamental tenets of UI design is that inputs must never be gated by animation. In this example, you can see equip animations in a customization menu. But what happens if the player triggers another one before the first one's finished? This is something that can easily happen in a scene like this. And what happens if a player just speeds through it? Well, it depends on the use case, but here we ignore all additional triggers until the first one's finished. So we can see that leg animation never happened. In the case of Lightsaber, we use dynamic animation so we can just tween to the right positions of all the components. Can we think of an example where UI doesn't follow either rule? Something we all had to deal with? Blu-ray menus. Just looking at this thing makes it feel like I'm swimming in molasses. So, I thought it'd be fun if we shortened it and added a few ease outs. And look at that. So much snappier feeling. It doesn't take much either. In this next example, you can see the two side by side. I actually only shortened it by a couple frames. Most of the work is actually in the ease out animation, but it just makes it feel so much more responsive. Number 3, animation is usability. Animation in UI is more than just eye candy. It can be vital to making the interface easier to understand and more intuitive to use. The visual design elements usually do most of the heavy lifting, but sometimes animation is what it takes an interface from passable to fully usable. Whether it's flashing elements to draw your attention to new elements or glinting highlights telling you where your focus is, UI without animation is not only lifeless and dull, it's actually broken. Thanks.
God. Hi, I'm Harrison Pink. I'm a lead game designer at Cyan, but before that I was a quest designer on Diablo 4 at Blizzard. Here's 3 things I'd love you to know about game design. Keep the animations flexible. For a game as big as Diablo 4, we have like 200 plus side quests in that game. That's not counting dungeons, that's not counting the campaign. And we need to use a lot of animations in a lot of weird ways that animators might not have expected us to use them in. So the more specific and like hyper-focused an animation is, the less useful it is in more places. So obviously we need a lot of really specific animations for really specific moments in the game, but when you're making a ton of content, the best way to do that is to mix and match a lot of like unexpected stuff to make really new creative stuff that's like surprising to the player. So the more flexible the animations are, the better in that case. This is going to make everybody in this summit super happy because the advice is less animation, please, which is going to make a lot of friends. An ARPG is all about efficiency. Players will get mad if it takes too many seconds to go from the portal to the bank and back because they're going to do that 5,000 times in their play session. So every single 6-second run ends up being, I don't know what's math, like 5 hours worth of gameplay. So if you can trim out as many extra frames of like settle at the end of animations as you can before they start to look really crappy. You know how like when someone's doing a crazy animation, they kind of like go back to their like, you know, that like idle pose. And a lot of times that takes forever. Even a quarter of a second, you can trim off like a quarter of a second, the better. You know how in a lot of third-person action games, when characters have to do like the keyed animation thing, they go up to like open a drawer, they do the kind of like, they turn their body and then they do the drawer thing. And then you're free. If that was in an ARPG, our fans would riot. They would go absolutely bananas. We had an animation of opening a chest in a dungeon where you'd actually kick the chest open and then you'd be locked in that animation for like 3/4 of a second. But there's 20 chests in the dungeon, and so you see that animation 20 times, and it ends up taking like a bunch of time out of the game, and it just makes the game feel, like UI, feel awful. There was a riot, and I think that animation lasted for maybe 3 hours in the game. The game feel is like the most paramount part, and like as just like UI, the snappy feel of an ARPG is really, really important. So anytime you can trim out extra frames out of an animation, it does count. It does add up over the course of 18-hour gameplay session, which we can all do at our age. And the other part is talk with the other parts of your team. If you're working on a big team or even a small team, kind of figure out how the designers or anyone else on the team is planning on using your animations. One of the things we had to deal with early on in Diablo 4's development is the animators sort of like delivered a great bunch of animations and they were all really great, but they didn't actually work with the character rigs that the character team had worked on, and so all of these like forces landed on me, and they're like, "Here's all your stuff," and I'm like, I can't use any of this stuff. So make sure you kind of talk with your other people on your team to figure out how they're planning on implementing your animations and how the whole system works from beginning to end all the way to the player, so you can sort of like build them in a way that is really useful for that pipeline. That's it. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Émilie Beauchamp, and I am Associate Art Director at We Be Games Montreal. I worked on a couple of titles, including the Batman Arkham series, Injustice, and Mortal Kombat. And recently, I've led the environment team on Gotham Knights. Now that you know a little bit about me, let's dive right in. We came across some challenges in the previous production, and I hope by sharing my perspective, I can maybe save you anim folks headache down the line. First of all, metrics. Metrics don't change until they do, unfortunately. They impact everyone's work, and that's why we try to enforce them as early as possible. However, feature will be added and design will evolve. Future-proof the work by keeping that in mind. For example, we had locked jump height metrics early on, and we thought we were good to go. But then a new feature was added for one of our character, Nightwing. His new pounce attack made him jump much higher to take down enemies dramatically. Down the line, some ceilings were way too low, and we needed to add a couple of meters to interiors that were already quite advanced art-wise. And because nobody wants to send the playtest build with the characters smashing their heads on the ceiling, changes had to be rushed. Especially when working on new IP, whenever new features are added or created, they can impact existing metrics. Second, making a thing is fast, but inventing something takes time. We've made a good old weather machine for our epic fight with Mr. Freeze, an iconic weapon inspired by the comics. That thing went through multiple iteration and design. I needed multiple versions to suit everybody's needs. Close-up shots required high fidelity and maximum resolution. And gameplay sequence had performance limitation and needed extreme optimization. Now, every artist lived in fear of updating the thing and breaking something. And our tech anim was the unsung hero of that story for updating the rig so many times. So inventing something takes multiple iteration. And third, environment unreal. What you see is all there is. Us in environment art, we are all about showmanship. We will fake everything. Other teams like cinematic can take a glance at our environment and make assumptions. Like this door must lead somewhere. Or this table must have an underside and can be flipped. Often, the need for cinematic versus gameplay are very different. And we had planned another epic fight with our heroes and a monster villain called the Man-Bat. And the fight led the characters smashing their way from one environment to another. Now, to make a long story short, the two parts of the environment were never connected. We hinted at the second space for continuity. However, the two sides needed loading due to optimization. And we had a real stressful moment when we realized that the fight concluded in a non-existing interior. So in environment art, what you see is all you get. And now, to conclude, if I can add just one more thing. It's common for islands of specialization to be isolated and focused on their own task. However, we want to work together. By sharing and feeding on each other's ideas, we can make the world more dynamic and more compelling, and by the same token, making awesome games. Thank you very much.
Hello, My name is Lana Bashinsky, and it is my great honor to present our first ever Animation Achievement Award at the GDC Animation Summit. And we can think of no better recipient than Bruno Velasquez. Bruno loves animation. There'll be time. There'll be time for applause. Hold your applause. Okay. Bruno loves animation and video games. His goal has been to achieve the perfect balance between a fun and responsive game with natural movement that is pleasing to the eye. The games that Bruno has worked on has put this mentality on full display, encouraging the industry to care more deeply about the impact that animation can have. Bruno got his start at Paradox Development as an animation intern on X-Men Next Dimension and worked his way towards animation leadership for the first time at Midway for Backyard Wrestling 2, There Goes the Neighborhood, as well as a game that holds a special place in his heart, Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks. But it was Bruno's move to Santa Monica Studio that will certainly resonate most with almost everybody in this room. He was a senior cinematic animator on God of War 2, became lead animator on God of War 3 and God of War Ascension, obviously crushing it, led him to becoming the studio animation director on 2018's God of War, and subsequently God of War Ragnarok. Most recently, Bruno's exceptional performance and deep care for the player experience has seen him elevated to game director on God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. Truly impressive and inspiring work. And his work is regularly acknowledged by his industry peers. Not just here, as it may surprise you. The animation projects he's been a part of have won a BAFTA, 3 nominations, and 2 trophies at the DICE Awards, as well as 2 Annie Award nominations. Please applaud for that. Bruno's 2018 GDC animation process of God of War 3 talk was a key inspiration behind starting the Animation Bootcamp, which led to this summit and all of you sitting here now. And throughout all of this incredible success, Bruno remains both humble and easily excitable about the craft. If you want some proof, just ask him to tell you about his favorite side-scrolling beat-em-ups and tell me you don't feel his spark. So without further ado, please join me in fully welcoming Bruno Velasquez. Seems a bit inappropriate for me to follow that. I'll just take a breath. My name is Sarah. I'm the CEO at Jolly Research. We create animation software that helps automate a lot of processes of facial animation, lip sync, all that fun stuff. And I am very, very aware that I am a visitor here. This is not a typical place for a vendor to be invited. But we're often asked to talk all the time about our position on AI and AI in art. When we started, we were a team that had our first tagline as we make animation tools for animators built by animators. We have on our founding team our Academy Award-winning animator Chris Landreth. We have some of the founding members of our Alias Wavefront, who basically made some of the beginning foundational technologies that are now Maya, before that was acquired by Autodesk. And so we brought with us a whole bag of assumptions on how to build a tool for animators. So companies called Jolly. What's a Jolly? And I promise this is not going to be a plug. Jelly stands for jaw and lip integration. It basically describes a little bit of the co-articulation model that's happening on the face when you're speaking. It's probably the world's most boring origin for a name. I met a guy at Gamescom 2 years ago who told me 3 different better examples, one of which was there's a mountain called Elevated Perspective in near Botswana. That is not our story. But we do like to think that we have a elevated perspective. And one of the assumptions that we do carry with us from our founding origins is about art and the process and keeping animators central to the creative process. Yes, we want to introduce some in our efficiencies for you because art, whether we want it to be or not, especially in the game space or in film, it's commoditized. You're trading it for money. It's subject to the same economies of scales and those pressures as anything else. And so you need to be always doing more for less. And we're trying to help you do that. However, you want to use our product, and so you have to. And so we had to create a product that actually worked in your pipeline. So I'm going to take a little bit of the learnings that we have painfully learned. Being a bootstrapped company gave us, I think, the biggest advantage on that perspective. Without having taken money from an investor, we were able to do this at our pace, make a ton of mistakes, test and validate and invalidate a ridiculous amount of assumptions, and learn the very important rule that an innovation is not a product. Some of you may know our very flashy little origin story. We were a research team at a U of T. We wrote a paper. In it was a prototype. Some folks at CDPR thought it was great, and they said, please come and build it for us. That was back in 2016. And then when you're done, as long as we can announce first, you sell it to the world. We did not know anything other than we had some, prototype and that type of thing. And the most important lesson that we did learn was innovation is not a product, and that is, I'm going to break that down a little bit more. Basically, I'm getting stuck here. It has to work in a pipeline. Basically, your innovation is in a silo until you actually ask it to do work upstream and downstream, or work between something that's happening upstream and something that's happening downstream from you. You want it to be frictionless here and not to clobber what's happening there. We actually thought that our first landing space was going to be for animation for series, basically because of our pedigree. That was not true. They were not ready for us at the time. There was all sorts of things that were happening post-render that could not happen after using something like ours. So like the angle was for localization, and that was a hard no. Games, however, were very, very much ready for this. And there was actually competitors in the market. And when we were doing our research, we were like, there's got to be a better way. And so we did try a better way. And that way was poo-pooed all over the place because it did not, use a bunch of machine learning. And it did not, we didn't pitch ourselves around town as being the next AI thing. We use AI to maybe hope someone, keyword finds us. But we weren't out for money. We wanted to do this our way. So basically, we have a procedural system that we hard code ourselves. And what this means is that we're light, we're nimble, and you can code on it too. And that's pretty important. Mike asked me to do this talk because we were sitting side by side at a dinner. And I was rambling about a white paper that I was trying to pitch to South by Southwest on the premise, can art be solved? And it basically draws on that original setup of, yes, it's a commodity, yes, it's subject to economies of scale, but the prevailing narrative right now is AI is going to come in and press button, art comes out, solved. That's so laughable. It obviously is not going to be the case. Is AI going to be part of our workflows increasingly? Absolutely, absolutely. But AI on its own does not know intent. AI on its own doesn't know directional choice. AI on its own doesn't know the necessary requirement for process and production, and that these things are elaborate layers. of cooperation and collaboration, that if one thing breaks, like when I'm evaluating something on how our animation looks on somebody's rig, I'm looking at this teeny tiny layer. And they actually have to, if this breaks here, cross-reference that with about 8,000 other layers that I don't have any idea what that is. We learned that painfully. And AI doesn't know that either. It doesn't know what it's cooperating with. Someone knows what it's cooperating with. And so just like when we move from analog to digital in terms of film and that type of thing for CGI, everyone said, oh, jobs are going to be lost, jobs are going to be lost. And I know that they are going to be lost, but it's not AI that's going to kill jobs. It's stockholders and capitalism in general. This is true. There's just going to be a bunch of people who know how to leverage this prompt-driven technology, and why would that not be fascinating? I think there's a reason why my mom, who doesn't know anything about what I do, because I didn't train for this, I was the salesperson for this technology, and now I'm standing here, so that's pretty fun. But she still knows what ChatGPT is. Like, that's wild to me. And I think what's interesting is the idea of a prompt-driven UI, that concept is universally fascinating. That you can speak something into existence is fascinating. And it sort of, people's perspective on it exists on a plane, and that plane over here is very excited and optimistic and, you know, the promise of what's possible, and over here is doom and gloom, and we're basically going to be facing the late 80s forever of lobby art until, which is also true, by the way, that is coming. but people are going to use this. And they're going to use it over and over and over again. And they're going to there's going to be a reason why this makes sense to do it this way. And it's going to happen where people are making rebellious choices to diverge from convention, and someone, art always requires a someone, has to know what to ask. I can put in a prompt to say anything. Someone who is a director, who has a vision, intent, who understands the relationship between the product and the person who's interacting with it, they know what to ask and what to ask over and over again. So can art be solved? Obviously not. It's not a problem to be solved. We are facing an economy where it is constantly positioned that it is, but we know that it's not, and creators like yourselves are the ones that are constantly working with the evolving new tools and creating amazing experiences that aren't solutions in themselves, but are experiences to be experienced. I have no idea where I am on time, Mike. I hope I'm doing okay. I'm going to leave this here last because I left it kind of on a good news story. When we first started working, we were working with the creative team at CDPR, and their quote was, this technology that we co-developed together, which we essentially did, is sort of inspired by the idea that John Lasseter put out there, which was that art challenges the technology, so what's required, we build for that, and in turn, the technology inspires the art. So at some point, we're going to see some very, very cool things. The 90s are coming in response to the imminent 80s. And I'm going to leave it there, guys. Thanks very much.
That was a lot, right? Time to pivot. Can you pivot with me? All right, my name is Ricky Wood. Happy to be here. I'm a principal animator at People Can Fly. I've been animating games for the past 20 years and instructing Games Workshop 3 for iAnimate for the last 6. I'm here to talk about the craft of animation. I'd like to begin with a quote, one of my favorites. We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. Play. It's so fundamental about what we do as game developers. We make games to be played. We play the games as we're making them, and we play around with the art and the animation in that process to iterate on the fun. It's why when talking with students and workmates about workflow and iteration, I'm always looking for ways to improve my speed and my efficiency, not purely to be fast, but so that I can be more playful. But there is one element to my workflow which gets peers both excited and a little bit concerned at the same time. That's animation layers. I'm a big fan of animation layers. I hope there's a lot of animators here today that do use them as well. I use them all day, every day. It doesn't matter if I'm blocking out or if I'm polishing an animation, I use them constantly. But don't worry, it didn't start out that way. They were added to Maya back in 2009, and honestly, I found them quite clunky, slow, and unintuitive. Today, I find them clunky, slow, and unintuitive. But that's why I'm here today, to share 10 things that I wish that I knew when starting out. Beginning with color coding. Can anyone spot the additive layer here? No, right? It's so unintuitive. This is an initial barrier when starting to use layers. So you can customize it. These are the colors that I use. Base keys are red, yellow is for additives, and blue is for override layers. So can you spot the additive now? A lot easier, right? So no matter the mode, when I'm adding lots of layers, I can tell which mode that I'm in. The colors change. You can do this yourself by right-clicking a layer, go to Attribute Editor, and look for Ghost Color. 18 will give you that nice yellow color. Best as if you use a custom hotkey. More on that at the end. Number 2, the anim layer editor allows you to play around with the weight, right? But it's capped between 0 and 1. That's a shame, because that's kind of like your volume control. There is a way that you can break out of that range, though. Let's take a look. So I've got this slam animation, right? And it's okay, but I want to add a bit of shoulder jiggle, bit of torso jiggle, being careful about the masses, send an energy wave through the body. Looks better, but can be stronger. I want to feel that more. So if I key that layer weight right there, and then open up the graph editor, I can actually take that curve and crank that up. That will allow you to go all the way up to 11 if you want. I'll take it up to about 2.5 here. You can even press play and do that in real time. Play around with the animation that way, get something that feels more impactful. Have you ever come back from vacation and forgotten completely what you were doing? Yeah, it's a nice feeling, right? But what about if you've gone for a coffee break, you get back and you've forgotten what you're doing? It happens, right? Well, animation layers can help with that too. Let's take a look. Especially with complex scenes like this one, there's a lot going on. So it's easy to look at it and just think, what was I doing? So if you right-click the top layer, select objects, will then select the contents in that layer. You'll see the keys right there on the timeline. You'll see what's selected. And then my favorite thing, just mute that layer, and you'll be able to see exactly what you just did. So I can remember, oh, I was just tweaking the line of action on that pose. So you can relax on vacation even more. Tip 4, you're familiar with grouping things in Maya, right? Hit Control-G, nice and easy, gets the scene nice and organized. Did you know you can do that with layers too? Except for it's not Control-G. Let's take a look. It is quite straightforward. I've got a bunch of layers here, right? And I've improved the line of action on this kick, but it's spread on like 20 different layers. I don't know. If I make an empty layer right here, I'll name it in this case. I don't usually name my layers, but you can. You can grab a bunch of layers here and middle mouse drag them into that empty layer, collapse it, you have a nice little group. So just mute that one group, right? No merging required, so there we go. Just add a bunch of layers, group them up, and see if you're going in the right direction, because sometimes you find you're not. All right, gimbal lock. I feel some tension maybe from animators here. It can happen, especially when you're adding a lot of layers. So let's say you've done an animation like this, right? You're happy with it, you get a note. Can you just tweak the apex a little bit so that the character is kind of slightly more upside down? You add a layer on the COG, you hit play, you think you're awesome, and you get this, right? What's going on? Maya's just giving you junk because it's gimbal locking. That control was just primed to break like that. So what are we going to do about it? Let's scrap that, rewind, start again. So we'll make a layer, right-click it, rotation accumulation, choose by layer. Maya's going to do some magic. I don't quite know how it's doing it, but it does magic, so that same process here, you'll get a nice smooth result. No gimbal lock. Much nicer. All right, tip number 6, free ambient motion. I love getting free animation. So you may have taken as animators an existing animation, modified it a little bit, and gotten something new, right? How about if you take the idle animation, usually one of the first animations that you make, add the whole rig to an additive layer, and now animate anything you want on top of that. You'll get free ambient motion, and usually you want to go back into the idle animation, the idle pose at the end, just zero key that rig, and voila, you're back into a nice idle pose, nice smooth transition. All right, so at this point, maybe you're learning some things about layers, and you're like, oh, this is looking kind of cool, but it's not all cool. Unfortunately, not all attributes are treated the same. Enums, those are the ones where you click on it, there's a list of text like local space or world space, things like that. They are treated differently. Let's take a look at that, because it can catch people out. I have this animation of a sword being drawn, right? And if I select that sword controller, you'll notice that the space attribute right there is changing between scabbard and arm. The constraint changes. If I take that controller, add it to a new layer, unfortunately, that attribute is now not animating. Super frustrating when you're starting out. It's a barrier against layers. Workaround, right-click it, remove it from the layer. It's not an ideal workaround, but it works, and you can continue using that in the layer. Best workaround is talk to your friendly neighborhood tech animation team and just don't use enums. Use floats or indexes. They work much better. Speaking of technical animators, they tend not to be a big fan of animation layers. They can complicate the scenes. If you are creating things like space switching tools, IK-FK matching tools, you've got all those layers to deal with. What do? Make another layer. That's my recommendation. So you could get fancy, you know, and check if there's layers and then only create one and all that kind of stuff, but it's simple to just make a new override layer. Let's take a look. So I've got this axe attack here, right? And I want to just twist the torso a little bit to improve the dynamism of this anticipation pose. Note when I do that, the head and the arms, they're in world space, so they don't follow the rotation of the torso. Those controls happen to be in a lot of layers, so how do I switch? Well, this tool is going to space switch to a new layer on top. Now those controls are in local space, so when I grab the torso, the arms and the head rotate with it. Don't need to worry about all those other layers. I can add the hips as well, make that pose nice and dynamic, and everything is nice and clean. Tip 9, when I'm showing my workflow to students and workmates, they're often asking, how do you retime anything when you've got 100 layers? Do you merge down? Well, guess what? Spoiler, add another layer. So let's make this animation more snappy, right? A lot of layers. Do I merge it? That's destructive. I don't want to destroy all that hard work. So instead, I grab the whole rig, bake simulation, make sure it's to a new layer, sampled by 1. So you capture all of that awesome animation that you've done onto a new override layer right there. Now you can retime that however you want. I'm going to use the graph editor here and the retime tool. I can make it nice and snappy. And my favorite thing about this is you can see the result and then double check it, A/B comparison, just mute it. No play blasts, no different files, no hitting undo. It's right there, the before and the after. And then the last tip that I have for you is to grab this free tool set, TB Animators. It's by my good friend Tom Bailey. Hey, Tom. And it will allow you to do all of the stuff that I just did, but even smarter ways. So you'll get a nice custom hotkey, for example, to create an additive layer. It will give you those same yellow keys, or an override. It will give you blue keys, and so much more. I'll leave you with a final thought. Mastering any craft begins with play. It's how we discover new ideas, how we grow. Each tip that I've shared today allows for greater freedom to be playful. You can more confidently add and remove motion, much like a sculptor adds and removes clay. So play around with it and see where your creativity takes you. Thanks.
Animation is the illusion of life.
Animación es la ilusión de la vida.
Animasjon er illusjonen av liv.
सजीवन आकृति जीवन का ही प्रतिरूप है.
Анимация – это иллюзия жизни.
动画不过是生命的幻影。
Animação é a ilusão da vida.
Animation, on dirait une espèce d'illusion de réalité. Pas gonaz non, ni ça, on besoin de rester.
What is animation? What is animation? What is animation? What is animation?
Animation is the illusion of life, right?
What is animation? What is animation?
We don't know!
What is animation? 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 What is animation?
They won't tell me either. So, you're just going to get my answer. Animation, much like we are an expression of love from the universe, is our own expression of love for life and art. And that's it.